Our members come first.
Affinity Plus helped me a lot to pass through this tough time.
My family was negatively affected.
Affinity Plus showed that they are invested in our success.
You are the top priority.
And they did it proactively.
I have found them to be respectful, supportive, and compassionate.
I don't feel judged.
I feel when I go, I'm in safe hands.
And that is why I bank with
Affinity Plus.
And welcome, everybody, to Gopher Review and Preview. Thanks to Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, I'm Justin Gard. Thanks for finding us every Wednesday or even later on all of our different platforms. We appreciate everybody watching, and we, of course, thank Affinity Plus for their great partnership in this all season long. Want to remind you, Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union is a proud sponsor of Golden Gopher Athletics, and they're here to help you with any of your financial needs. When you bank at Affinity Plus, you are on the same team as the Gophers, and you are golden. AffinityPlus.org is the website to learn about becoming a member, learning all about the different services that they provide. They've been a great supporter of Golden Gopher Athletics as well as mine here at iHeartMedia, so we appreciate them jumping on with this new endeavor. Really excited about tonight's show. If you like history, you're really going to enjoy Scott Docterman from The Athletic. He's covered the Hawkeyes for a really long time and has sort of become this unofficial Floyd of Rosedale Trophy historian. He's going to join me in the second segment to preview the Iowa Hawkeyes as well as talk about Floyd of Rosedale. But in our first segment to preview the Iowa game this Friday night at TCF Bank Stadium, we have co-defensive coordinator and safeties and cornerbacks coach Joe Harris-Simiak. You may recall that with Joe Rossi out because of COVID last week, Coach Harris-Simiak stepped in to call the plays. We talked about that process. We talked about him being on the sideline. We talked about what it was like calling the plays again. He was a defensive coordinator for a while. Then he was a head coach at Maine before coming here at the U. I really enjoyed our conversation with Joe Harris-Simiak, and that's where we begin tonight's Gopher Review Preview. Well, Coach, let's start with the Illinois game. What was it like to kind of be back in the saddle, calling the plays, being in charge of the whole operation? I know you have a lot on your plate on a week-to-week basis, and I know you and Coach Rossi work together when it comes to the game plan and everything. But in terms of just calling the plays, what was it like to be doing that for the first time in a while?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun. You know, we throw that fun word around here a lot, and that's what we wanted to do, is have some fun on Saturday. But certainly, like, anytime you're calling it, there's a little bit more adrenaline. You know, just being more organized and kind of you know, with your calls and what you're doing. But you know, certainly like what Coach Rossi does and how much, you know, clearly he was involved in that, right? With our Zoom meetings last week, and being with him, talked to him a bunch of times on Saturday before the game. You know, we said the message all week was, you know, my first message to the defense was that Monday after practice, because of election day, we practiced on Monday, was it wasn't going to be about the call.
Right.
We hadn't been executing the calls, and it's the action of the call that matters. And I thought our guys did a really nice job with that on Saturday.
So some coaches need to be in the press box to kind of get their thoughts, to kind of get everything organized. Some like to be on the sidelines to kind of feel what's going on. What's it like being on the field, making those calls and everything? Why do you prefer it that way?
You know, that's the way, first and foremost, that's the way I've always done it. That's the way I was taught, I guess, learned from the coordinators that I worked under initially. And, you know, I always felt like I just had a better feel of the energy. And I think defense is a lot about energy and the feel of the game. And, you know, the other factor was I didn't want to, and we didn't want to kind of switch things up and move a bunch of people around. Right. So by myself staying on the field, we kept the coaches that were in the box, and the coaches that were on the field. And I thought that was to be consistent for the players. We wanted to keep everything as simple as possible, and I think that allowed that to happen. And then, like I said, just for me, I didn't want the first time going up was, you know, the first time doing it like that. I didn't think that would be the best decision.
So as I watched it, and I've told every coach that I've ever worked with, it took me like 4 years to figure out that when somebody yells Ringo on defense, they're talking about the right side. So you're talking with a layman here, Coach. But as I watched, it really seemed like you guys were aggressive right from the jump. You sent Coney early, you sent Justice early. It seemed like you were really trying to force the action a little bit. Is that a fair representation of what you guys were trying to do? And why do you think it was so effective?
Yeah, I think we talked all week just about being aggressive. You know, and that's us, not just with the blitzing, which is certainly helps with that and the pressures, but I think just aggressive in our actions, the way we get off blocks and block destruction and tackling. So that aggression word and that violence word was thrown around a lot during the week. And then certainly we felt like as a staff, we had some looks that we wanted to take advantage of. They were kind of banged up at the receiver spot, so they were creating 11 personnel formations out of 12 personnel looks. So we had some looks that we like to be able to send some guys and again get some movement going, which to certain plays and to certain looks you like movement more than you like just being static. So it was a great job by the staff coming up with that stuff. But certainly there was a mindset kind of set the tone early, and I think the biggest play of the game was the first third down.
Yeah.
Big O getting the sack, kind of setting the tone. We haven't been doing a great job getting off the field in those down and distances, and that kind of really set the tone. And we kind of just used that play to keep us going in the right direction.
So I've talked to PJ a couple of times this week. He's mentioned Coach Rossi as being kind of this omnipresent figure in your meeting rooms via Zoom. Like he's basically a robot that's just moving through the facility a little bit. But what has it been like, to work that way? I'm envisioning, Howard Hughes in The Aviator. He's in a room by himself in his house with just Kleenex everywhere and food containers everywhere because he's just quarantined. But what's it been like, that back and forth and that go-between with him at home, obviously, and you guys all working here?
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you what. Like when we watch film and we go through things, I know he's on the Zoom and I know it's like it's virtual, but our staff just works so well together. I really do believe that, and the transparency there, whether he's there in person or on the virtual, it's been the same in terms of the communication. Us delivering a game plan to the guys, and has it certainly been different with him not being there? Yes, it's kind of weird when you have to run the remote and. You have to rewind it, and you kind of like got to think about his thoughts if he wants you to rewind it again. So that's kind of like a funny part of what goes on. But, I think also just the players have done a really, really good job with it, understanding it. We start the unit meetings off with Coach, and we've all bought in. And, I thought something that was pretty special was, after the game, all those guys, texted Coach Rossi and just said, "Love you, man, and wish you were here." And, even though he wasn't there in person, we know who runs the show and we know who leads the defense, and there's no one better to do it than him.
And before we talk about a couple of your safeties that you work most specifically with, I do want to talk about your relationship with Coach Rossi because it goes all the way back to Maine, obviously, working with him there. He recommended you to get the head coaching job there. And obviously you had a lot of people on your side there, it seemed like. But what do you remember about, first meeting him and working with him there and why you thought it would be a good fit to come on over here and work with him again?
Yeah, so I got to Maine in 2011, and I was the assistant D-backs coach, and obviously Joe was the coordinator. And just the first thing that stuck out was just the extreme amount of detail he coached with, and that's really that was my first Division I job, working for him as the coordinator, and then another coach as the head coach. But just the extreme amount of detail stood out, and that's kind of how, again, you kind of who you coach under is kind of how you build your own resume and how you become. And everyone's got their coaching tree, and that just taught me the level of detail that you need to have, especially at this level. And then certainly, the decision to come here, there was a lot of factors that went into that. But I think first and foremost was just that there was people here, especially Joe, that I knew, and I knew were good people. And if they talk about a place and how special it was and they're good people, then, that kind of seals the deal for you. Coach Nickel is someone I've known for a long time, went to the same college as me. So again, there were just people here that really talked about this place in a special way. And I knew how good of, human beings they were. And I knew they wouldn't be, lying or omitting something. So it was kind of an easy decision that way.
So as we talk about a couple of your players now as we wrap up, Coach, I'm curious, Coach Fleck has told us, even going back to fall camp a year ago, how excited he was about Tyler Newbin. We know why he didn't get a lot of opportunities a year ago, a couple of good guys playing in front of him. And now he's expected as an inexperienced guy to jump in. It seems like he's really progressing well, forced a fumble a couple of weeks ago against Maryland right at the goal line, made some big tackles as well against Illinois. How do you feel about his development right now?
I think he's growing every week, and that was the message, last week as a team was to grow. And, we always talk about that here, and he is going to be a great player. And the reason I know that is because his process is right. The result hasn't been everything that we've wanted so far. But if you go at the process the way he does, and he works as hard as anyone on the team and practices the way he does, the result is eventually going to be the one he wants. And he's not always going to get that. And on some of those plays on Saturday, he didn't get that. But his process is right. And I've been coaching long enough to hope that I've seen the process go this way. It's not always going to be exactly the result you want at the beginning, but the way he goes about it and the way he attacks the day, practice, and everything in his life, he's going to end up on the right side of things. And like you said, he's gaining experience. He's learning, he's growing every day. And, he's not 11, but that's okay. He's not supposed to be. And I tell him that all the time. Like, the guy's going to be the NFL Rookie of the Year. I don't care who came in.
Yeah.
If we put Howden over there, it wouldn't matter. So he's got to be Tyler Nubin. He's got to be 27, and he's got to be for the next 3 years. When he leaves, then it's going to be who's going to replace 27. And that's what we talk about. But it's one day at a time, and he just has to be himself. And if we can get him to do that, to process, right? We talked about this. The message for him last week was this confirmation of information, right? He is so fast, and he sees things, and he acts, and he goes. But now, as you're going, as you process that first piece of information, now it's the confirmation of that as a safety, because now I need to process where I need to go next, and that's the next step for him. And once he does that, I mean, you see the plays that he makes on kickoff. The play he made on kickoff,
right?
I think it was the last kickoff, is just an incredible play. So he's going to be a great player, and we're just going to get him pointed in that direction. But he's growing every day, and I couldn't be happier for him.
You mentioned Howden. He's a guy right next to Tyler who has gone through some of the same process, right? A couple of years ago, a lot of bumps. Now he turned into a really good safety in the Big Ten. So how much does it help to have a guy that's kind of gone directly through what Tyler's going through right now?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've talked to Tyler about that, and I've talked to Jordan also about, now he's got to take Tyler through it, right? He's got to get him through this, and that's what teammates do. It's easier to get through hard times together than it is alone, no matter what you're doing. And, they're working really well together, and he's kind of taking them underneath his wing. And then just in terms of Jordan has developed his game. He's always been a great cover guy, always had the feet, right? Was recruited as a corner, kind of moved in. Now he's weighing 205 plus, and he's developing the next part of his game. And I thought he made some really good tackles on Saturday, especially when some runs squirted through, and he was that one high safety having to get it down. And that's where, in the first 2 weeks, we haven't been getting it down. And he's developed that part of his game. It's got to keep going. But he's working and molding himself into a complete safety. And I think hopefully in the next year or two, he's going to be one of the tops in the Big Ten.
Lastly, Coach, it's the Iowa Hawkeyes this Friday night. They're coming off a victory over Michigan State, breaking in a new quarterback. What have you seen from the Hawkeyes? What's going to be important for the Gophers on Friday night against Iowa?
Yeah, I think when you turn on the film, Iowa's Iowa. Right, they put people in there and they run the same stuff. They might have a few tweaks here and there, but you're going to get your two back plays. You're going to get your throws down the field, your play action. They're going to challenge our eyes at the safety spot, and we gotta take care of us. Minnesota's got to love Minnesota, and Minnesota's got to take care of Minnesota, because when Iowa comes out, over the last 2 years I've been here, and even when you turn on the film from previous years, they do what they do, and they're gonna challenge you to be consistent. And we have to do that. And our eyes got to be in the right spot at all levels of the defense. And if we consistently can do that, then we'll get in some third down situations where, hopefully we can create some looks and some confusion and get after the quarterback like we did on Saturday. But, Minnesota, we got to take care of Minnesota. And if we do that, we'll put ourselves in position to have a chance to win.
My thanks to Joe Harris-Simiak for joining me here on Gopher Review and Preview. Really interested to hear how they work with Joe Rossi, given that he's remote. He's on Zoom basically all the time. He's quarantined in his house. At least he has been up until this point, away from his wife, away from his kids, basically in one room, one area of his house, just kind of hanging out, game planning for Illinois last week, game planning for Iowa this week. And it's pretty interesting to hear that perspective as the coaches try to put a plan together for the Hawkeyes. It's a 6 o'clock kickoff on Friday night at TCF Bank Stadium. Our pregame show will start just after Bumper to Bumper at 4 o'clock. Looking forward to the pregame show. And Scott Docterman is a great Iowa mind. He's covered the Hawkeyes for a long time, and he also is a Floyd of Rosedale historian. Done a lot of research into this series. You're going to hear some great stories towards the end of this conversation. But we know the Athletic here in the Twin Cities because of great storytellers like Russo and Johnny Athletic and everybody that they have in the team here. The Athletic is perfect for Scott Docterman because he is a walking encyclopedia of the Iowa side and of this traveling trophy. And we haven't done this quite yet on the show. We've done a lot of reviewing with Gopher-related guests. I thought this week would be a good time to preview the opponent, the 1 and 2 Iowa Hawkeyes, with Scott Docterman from the Athletic. Well, there's nobody that I know that appreciates the Floyd of Rosedale rivalry, the Iowa and Minnesota rivalry, more than my next guest, Scott Docterman from the Athletic. Been covering the Hawkeyes forever, and cool enough to join me on Gophers Review and Preview here. Scott, thanks for the time, man.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be a part of it, Justin.
So we're going to talk about Floyd of Rosedale in a little bit, but this particular Hawkeye team, we were talking, setting this up. There's no rhyme or reason for the Big Ten this year, right? We have no idea what's going to happen on any given Saturday. Who's going to be allowed to play? Who's going to be allowed to play within the teams that are allowed to play? We have no way of breaking anything down. So I'll throw you this one right out of the gate. Through 3 games, what do you think you know about this group of Iowa Hawkeyes?
They actually might be one of the more predictable teams in the Big Ten because they've actually had 3 decent games. They just had mistakes that cost them in the first 2 against Purdue and Northwestern. And so those were mistakes that were semi-predictable because 100 yards worth of penalties in the first game against Purdue and 2 critical fumbles in Purdue territory cost them in a 4-point loss. And then Northwestern, you try to throw the ball 50 times in your Iowa with a bunch of, with a couple of, young players, it just doesn't work. So I think what we've seen, though, out of the rest of the Big Ten is we know nothing other than Ohio State's better than everybody else. Penn State, 0-3, really?
Yeah,
I didn't expect that. Maryland, after what happened to Northwestern, and then to see what they were able to do to Penn State and Minnesota. Michigan State, fool's gold. They beat Michigan and then come to Kinnick, and I don't even think they ever really arrived. So I have no idea what's going on in this league.
Well, you mentioned the mistakes, and that's been, we've watched, Iowa's played before the Gophers most of these weeks. And so we've kind of have it on in the press box as we're popping through games. And, that opening game against Purdue, you're watching, and it just feels like kind of a typical Iowa game where they've got a lead and they're just going to kind of salt it away. And I looked up right before the Gopher game. I said, how did Iowa lose that? Northwestern, same deal, right? I mean, they're up big early, and then I come back about an hour later, and all of a sudden they're behind. The mistakes, I think, are what surprises me because the reputation of Iowa, and PJ has said it this week already. They never make mistakes. You got to play really well and really sound because Iowa never makes mistakes. What's the theory of why they were so mistake prone through those first couple of games?
The first one was pretty easy to document. I mean, they hadn't had a lot of time to prepare. Iowa traditionally plays either an FCS team or a low-level group of 5 team right off the bat, and usually works through a lot of those mistakes, the stupid penalties, and then they have a comfortable win. They understand what they did wrong, and then they move forward. Well, they didn't have that, and Purdue has a tremendous wide receiver. I mean, probably on the same level as Rashad Bateman and David Bell, and he was able to kind of torch a defense that had some parts that are now in the NFL, and but it was those penalties, and it was 2 turnovers. One of them was at the 10-yard line where a guard for Iowa hit the running back, trying to push him forward, but hit him more from the side and just leveled him, and the ball flew out. I mean, it was a fluke play, and it was 14-7 at that point, but Iowa had complete control of the game, and before you know it, it's a tie game. And then you get in the fourth quarter and another fumble when Iowa's kind of on a drive to score. And then Northwestern, 17-0. They turned 2 turnovers into touchdowns, and it looked like, okay, Iowa's back on track. And Northwestern was very patient, typical Pat Fitzgerald team. And I dare say a 17-0 lead, if the stands were full, probably doesn't get overturned, but you never know. I mean, and you got to give a lot of respect and credit to Northwestern. I mean, they played really well.
The story offensively that you wrote this past week is about all the new things that Iowa is doing to still run the ball like they historically have. I want to talk about that in a second, but Spencer Petras through 3 games, his real first, he's been the guy in waiting here for the last couple of years following Nate Stanley. What have we seen from him so far?
He's pretty inconsistent. He's got a big arm. He likes to use it. And in the first game, that's what he did. He threw the ball all over the place down the field and didn't connect all that much. So then they said, look, let's go through your progressions a little bit more for week 2. And he was still throwing the ball pretty hard. And that cost him a lot of in 3 interceptions against Northwestern, one of which was in field goal range in the fourth quarter. He just threw the ball too hard. So I think right now he's still a young, inexperienced quarterback with a lot of talent. He's only a sophomore. He was at the high school that he broke all of Jared Goff's high school records. And it came down, Iowa decided to pick him over Zach Wilson for that quarterback scholarship. So there's a little bit riding on this that we've seen what's going on with Zach Wilson. So I do think he's capable of being a really good quarterback in the future. It's just, he does have some weapons on the outside, but right now he's still kind of working his way forward.
For people watching that say, who's Zach Wilson? You need to watch random TV times to find BYU, but it's worth the price of admission because he's absolutely spectacular this year with the Cougars. Let's talk about the running game. Iowa under Brian Ferentz here the last couple of years has kind of come into the quote-unquote the 21st century, doing some jet sweep actions, perish the thought, and also shifting guys around, doing a lot of pre-snap motion stuff. What's been different offensively, specifically this past week? They didn't do it very much against Northwestern because they felt like Northwestern's defense could stop it. What are they trying to do in terms of running the ball this year that maybe is a little bit different than years past, people that have watched the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, I mean, just coming into the 21st century is really the key here. I mean, jet sweep action, all it does is it forces those linebackers just to wait, just to hesitate a slight bit. And when they do that, then the holes open up because the tempo is better on Iowa's side versus what it's been on the defensive side. I mean, Iowa's always had a really good and sound blocking scheme.
Yep.
It works at every level. It works in college, it works at the NFL. But what we've seen the Vikings be able to do with Dalvin Cook or the 49ers be able to do with Raheem Mostert for at least last year is be able just to be a little bit more multiple in your blocking and to have that slight hesitation. It's really done wonders. And then running out of the shotgun, which every team in America has done really except Iowa and Wisconsin. But, Wisconsin, it doesn't really matter. But with Iowa, it allows their running backs to see the field a little bit better. That's what Tyler Goodson said. And last week he had a 71-yard run and really, again, kind of the same deal that he can see the field better. The blocking is there. The tempo is the right fit. So if Iowa could continue this, their running game will keep them relevant throughout the season and probably win most of its games.
It's new school enough for Brian Ferentz, but old school enough for his dad, right? I mean, because how many times have you written over 22 years the resistance to change? Or we know what Iowa's done since I was in school there. 22 years ago they've done the same thing.
Exactly. It's been and we've seen it. I mean, really, they had to change because over the last 3 years they've been under 4 yards per carry, and
right.
That's just that's not winning football. Now Iowa's measurements are different than other programs because it's a cumulative effect, the physical toll that they impose upon their opponents, and then just the style of play. If you run at 4.5 yards per carry, where Ohio State that's down, but at Iowa that's championship level football. So I think right now they're at about a 5-point yard per carry average, and if they can keep that up and continue to push forward with some of these updates, I think they'll be very competitive on the offensive side of the ball.
Defensively, in watching the games and reading your coverage, obviously Nixon really stands out. I mean, it seems like he's ruining games for other teams. Tell us a little bit about him up there at defensive tackle. Had offers from pretty much everybody, it seems like, and how this defense has come together here through 3 games.
Yeah, he's a really interesting story because he was from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and a lot of the schools backed away from him because grade-wise he wasn't going to be able to get in. Iowa stayed with him and tried really hard. It was probably a lot like the story of The Blind Side. He really had to catch up, and he wasn't able to qualify right from the very beginning. So he went to Iowa Western, which is always a tough spot for Iowa because you go to community college and things open up. Well, they were able to go to the NCAA and appeal and get him in at semester. He just had to redshirt for a year. And now you're seeing an incredible player. I mean, athletically, he's superior to just about any defensive tackle I've seen in Iowa. First 2 weeks, he had 18 tackles. Just not only, he's leading the Big Ten in tackles for loss. I mean, just he's athletically, he's going to be at the next level next year. I mean, I don't think anybody should have any pretense that he's going to be there for a senior year at Iowa. He's built like Jaleel Johnson and has athletic ability like Christian Ballard, which, kind of reminds me athletically probably of Rashid Hageman a few years ago, and this guy's motor is special. So when you combine that athletic ability with a tenacity, you're going to see his name called by the end of Friday night next year in the first couple of rounds of the NFL draft.
So I would classify you as a Floyd of Rosedale historian. You've written a lot about it. I know you've researched it probably more than anybody. What drew you to this rivalry in particular, this trophy in particular, and what are some of the favorite things you've learned about this rivalry, which dates back, over a century now?
Yeah, I really started getting into it with my kids. They kind of enjoyed the pageantry, my son especially, the pageantry of some of these rivalry games. And, we lived in Missouri for a little while, then we moved to Iowa, and he really started taking a shine to the pig. And, and who doesn't, at that age, he got a picture taken with it. And then next thing you know, I really started looking back at it. In 2009, I went to the spot where Floyd is buried, in Mabel, Minnesota, just about 6 miles north of the Iowa-Minnesota border, and met with the farmer. And what a tremendous guy he is. He's since passed on, but he was with the U.S. Navy on D-Day. Wow. Donald Jerdrum is his name, and he's a Gopher fan. And he has Floyd buried under this little clump of trees on his farm in southeast Minnesota. And on D-Day, he was the one taking soldiers across the channel in Normandy, and just a tremendous story. Well, the more he started talking about him and picking up Floyd for $50, buying him from the University of Minnesota after he switched hands a few times, the more taken I was with this story. And then I just started researching not only how it came into play, which was tremendous, but over the years, so many different avenues. I mean, the 1960 game, which I guess we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of it, where you had, number 1 Iowa and number 2/3 Minnesota going head to head. And it was the first time a major game took place that had 2 black quarterbacks.
Right.
And Sandy Stevens, of course, was victorious, but Wilburn Hollis, Iowa's quarterback, who grew up in Possum Trot, Mississippi, an orphan, and went to Boys Town, and then he became an Iowa player, and a really good one at that. And so, one thing I'm writing about for Thursday is just, the subdued trophy celebrations we've got this year. And I kind of bring up a 1954 memory for Forrest Evashevsky. And that, at one point, Minnesota won, and it was Bob McNamara's 89-yard kickoff return.
Yeah,
really lit that fuse, and he got so mad. They used to just hand it over at the end of the game in the locker room. Well, he wouldn't do it, and finally, the whole team was outside. The Gophers team was outside Iowa's locker room, and he goes, "Okay, fine, give it to him. Hind first." So that's what happened there. And of course, over the years, we've had, just so many great games and great memories. Heck, a fight between Sid Hartman and Gus Schrader from the Cedar Rapids Gazette in 1984. I mean, 2, 80-year-old men at that point, or 75-year-old men at that point, getting after it. So it's just, there's just so much wrapped up in this, and that's what makes college football and college rivalries special.
Well, and you've had characters to go along with it. Everybody remembers Coach Fry, dressing up as a farmer because he'd gotten word. And I'm sure people down in Iowa love it when we get all hoity-toity big city on everybody. Daryl Thompson and I agree. The We Hate Iowa cheer, I think, is the dumbest cheer that Gopher fans do. I reject that categorically. Gopher fans already know this, so I'm not breaking any news. We can be better than this. And also, you got to beat them every once in a while, too, right? I mean, it's been 5 years. I was thinking about, it was the Max Williams game in 2014, the last time that the Gophers have had Floyd of Rosedale up here. But there's so many characters throughout this rivalry as well. And the Hayden one always gets me, where he's just, coming in, first of all, barnstorming the Big Ten, no pun intended, back early in that era, and saying, yeah, I've got my straw, I've got my overalls, and this is how we are down in Iowa. I thought that was just beautiful.
It is tremendous because, and it all started with Smokey Joe Salem, the coach at the Gophers. And when he was at South Dakota, he would do that for the South Dakota State game, kind of make fun of them because they were the ag school and dress up in overalls and stuff. So he took that tradition to Minnesota where he played. And both Hayden and a couple other people always said this was a poking fun at Sid, but it was also poking fun at Smokey Joe Salem. And so after the game, everybody was kind of gathered around outside the Iowa's locker room, and Phil Hattie, the SID, said, Hayden goes, "I'll be back in just a minute." And he came right out, and there's video of it. It's just an incredible moment. And you got to appreciate that, because that's somebody who's not taking themselves too seriously, right. He's having fun with it, and really enjoyed, winning Floyd at Rosedale, because it had been a few years. He hadn't, even their Rose Bowl year in 1981, that Minnesota won that game and was able to take Floyd to Rosedale.
Well, I remember Kirk Ferentz talks about that when I've talked to him over the years. That was, I think, 81 was his first year on the staff with Hayden. And he said, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm not really thinking about a pig trophy or anything like that. And after the game, he sees how crazy everybody went for it. And he says, okay, I get it. This is a big deal. I mean, and he still, Kirk obviously really well. He remembers everything, every little detail about everything. But I always thought that was interesting. And basically the handshake line, he figured out like, okay, we got to win this thing because it's an important trophy for both teams.
Absolutely. And you've seen it over the years. There have been upsets. There have been big games. One that comes to mind for me is 2010. It was the first time the Iowa had played at TCF.
Yep.
And it was cold. It was like 14 degrees. And I'm sure you remember, you were there.
Yep.
It was a horrible game. Minnesota was 2-9. They already fired
Tim Brewster. Jeff Horton was coaching. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
And they threw out all the stops, onside kicks, and did all kinds of things. Iowa had just lost its opportunity to win the Big Ten title the previous week and was kind of flatlining at that point in the season. But to see how energized the Gophers were to come over and win something in a year that had so much turmoil just shows how important it is. And I think that's what it's a symbol of victory, but it's also a symbol of pride. And I remember a basketball game at Minnesota shortly thereafter. Fans were able to take a picture with Floyd at Rosedale. Iowa takes it to the state fair, and I know it gets brought around the both states, whoever has it. And I think that's really important because both teams have traveling trophies that you can kind of discard. I'm sure Minnesota's with Penn State, the Governor's Victory Bell or whatever is one of those where, okay, that's neat. And then Iowa with, really the Cyhawks kind of interesting because of that rivalry, but the other two, the bowl with Wisconsin, and that's not the axe, that's not the pig, that's right. At a different level. This one to me has got such history behind it, and the stories are just so important that I think it forms the fabric of Midwestern football. So to me, it's special, it's unique, and it's something that always needs to be remembered.
Yeah, we could talk about it all day, and we have. I've already kept you longer than I said, but I'll end it with this: is that I've told people this week, like 2020 is so insane, right? We obviously know that, and we have no idea what's going to happen with like bowl games or the playoff, or if we're even going to play after this Friday night. Who knows? We have no idea. But one thing that sustains in 2020 that feels normal are the rivalries and the trophies, and we might not remember anything from the 2020 season besides the pandemic, except who wins this game or who wins the axe, or like who, obviously the day after Thanksgiving for Iowa, that Iowa-Nebraska game. That to me makes it feel normal that Floyd or Rosedale will be at TCF Bank Stadium on Friday, and whoever wins it gets to keep it for a year. We may not remember anything else, Scott, but we will remember that, I would imagine, out of this year,
Absolutely. And that's the important thing. I mean, no matter who wins on Friday, that feels a little bit normal. I mean, Iowa and Minnesota have played every year since 1931. In a couple of weeks, Minnesota and Wisconsin will battle for the axe. That has to be played. Iowa, Minnesota has to be played. I feel like Iowa, Nebraska is getting to that level, and same thing with Iowa, Wisconsin. I mean, these are games, these are series that you remember. And if we have anything that we can take away, whether it's Minnesota ends up 3-5 or 1-7, or same thing with Iowa, at least you get these games in. And, I would say, bowl games are going to be strange this year. I don't know how, Iowa or Minnesota is going to play in the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, North Carolina. But what would be more interesting to me is, maybe they should reserve, the Viking Stadium for a weekend and just bring up 6 or 8 teams and play in early January. Maybe Iowa and Iowa State could play. Maybe Nebraska, K-State, or Minnesota. Maybe Minnesota plays Iowa State instead. Something like that, I think, might be more beneficial outside of the New Year's Six, because right now, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I just don't see anybody from Iowa or Minnesota willingly flying to Charlotte, North Carolina to see them play NC State or Duke.
Well, it is 2020. I rule nothing out. I mean, that idea, for all we know, they're already down the road with your plan there. Thanks as always, man. It's good to see your face. Good to hear your voice. I love reading you at The Athletic. We have a great relationship with them up here. It's a perfect venue for you with the stories that you like to tell. Enjoy the game Friday night, which I know you will. Thanks for taking the time.
All right. Thanks, Gardy. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Scott Docterman from The Athletic for joining me on Gophers Review and Preview, and check out his work on The Athletic. He tells some great stories about this rivalry, about this trophy. He has some good stuff, as he mentioned there, coming up this week about the Floyd of Rosedale. They've played, like he said, since the 1930s. Every single year. That does it for the show tonight. We appreciate everybody watching. Want to thank Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union and remind you that video banking is now live with your Affinity Plus team. So whether it's new memberships or new loans or just general questions